Hi everyone, it's Pymm here. I'm your lecturer for this subject. I'm an adjunct senior lecturer at CSU, which means essentially that I've retired and I just teach on a small number of subjects which, I have some expertise and experience. I'm also the course coordinator for the grad cert in AV archiving. First point to make, I suppose, is that the topic contents and during the semester input will come from staff from the National Film and Sound Archive as well as from myself. So a lot of the topic contents were written with in conjunction with staff at the NFSA and myself. And I might add that I worked at the NFSA for many years before joining CSU as a lecturer back in 2005. So you're getting, we like to think, words of wisdom from real experts in the field. And it's also an opportunity for you to question some of those experts as well. So I encourage you to use the forums a lot and to ask questions. Don't, respond to the questions that are in the subject materials, but also you can, if you've got your own queries, questions, put them out there and you can get some good feedback from experts in the field. It's still very much traditionally based materials, this subject. So there is another subject, INF431, which you'll do as part of the grad cert, which is focused exclusively on digital preservation. And obviously these days, digital preservation is the challenge. There's no question about it. Virtually everything audiovisual now is made digitally. There's very tiny amounts of physical media created anymore. No more videotape, no more film, is there? And there haven't been sound tapes for a long time. So the focus for the next generation, I suppose, is the preservation of those digital artifacts, and that actually will be a lot more difficult than the preservation of the physical media. If you can picture it, can't you? If you had a 35mm film, you stick it in a cupboard, and assuming you're not living in somewhere like Darwin or somewhere, 20 or 30 years or 50 years time, 100 years time, you could open that cupboard and with a bit of cleaning and a bit of care probably, with a bit of luck, that film will still be quite playable, quite watchable, and certainly in a condition where an expert could transfer it onto another media. A digital file, if you put the little square box into a cupboard and come back to it in 50 years' time, it's almost certain that you won't be able to play it. The software won't exist, probably the hardware won't exist, and it'll take a huge amount of effort to interpret it, because the sort of software we use when we're making digital film, for instance, is complex software. So in one way, with the physical media, we have a bit of luxury in the time, but in others, that's, having said that, you'll see later on in the course, there's a report from the NFSA that suggests, we've got to copy tape by 2025 or something, otherwise we're in serious danger of losing a lot. So there is a time consideration, obviously, but at the same time, I think it's probably not quite as critical in some areas. Obviously some areas it is, than it is with the digital world. Okay, so we're going to talk about things like physical degradation, which is fairly obvious, chemical decomposition and stuff like that, and what steps we can take to try to limit that, and what we can do when things have gone too far. We're going to talk quite a bit about passive preservation, which is storing things in a good environment, basically, looking after things so that we can never stop deterioration. It's inherent in us, it's inherent in everything. A mountain's going to disappear given enough millions of years. So we can never stop deterioration, we can only slow down the process. And so preservation, you must remember, is not a one-off activity, it's an ongoing process where we have to keep coming back to it. Okay, maybe we digitize something, a sound recording, and we've now got a digital file. We can't breathe a sigh of relief and say, "Oh, that's preserved forever," because that digital file is now going to have to be preserved, and we're going to have to do things with that to ensure that it's still accessible into the future. And what is the future? we talk about trying to preserve things forever. Realistically, that's impossible, of course. And what's forever? I think for our purposes, if we talk about 100 years, if what we do now means the thing is going to be accessible in 100 years' time, then we've done very well and we should be proud of ourselves. But remember, it is an ongoing process, not a one-off thing. We also talk about active preservation, which is where you get down and dirty and actually handle physically the item and do stuff to it, depending on what needs to be done. You can imagine that requires high levels of expertise, is very time-consuming and resource-intensive, so it's expensive. And so in the ideal world, we don't want to be doing too much of that, because no archive anywhere in the world is going to have enough money to do everything it needs that needs to be done, basically. So we've got to try to ensure that passive preservation means things don't deteriorate too quickly and things are looked after well, so that the active preservation, which can only focus on a little bit of the collection, can be done on the right materials. And we talk about ethics and prioritizing, because in the end there's some issues there, aren't there, about who decides and how do we decide on what is given active preservation treatment, what is given the top-notch level of attention, compared to the rest of the, when we consider the rest of the stuff cannot be looked at in that way. And so you might like to think, and who knows what the right answer is, say a feature film where maybe we spend $100,000 on not restoring is the wrong word, in conserving and bringing it up to its original pristine glory. That's $100,000. While down in our vaults we have maybe 1,000 newsreels, short newsreels from the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, all of them 2 or 3 minutes long, which require a modest amount of effort, cleaning, checking for shrinkage, that sort of stuff, and are not going to get looked at because we spent all our preservation budget on one feature film. So what's reasonable? The feature film is very well known and respected and all the rest of it. The newsreels give us real insights into life, before television. How do we decide the priority? And so, there is no right or wrong answer. In the end, we have to come up with some criteria and assess things against those and make our decisions. But you can see it's more to it than just a technical solution to things. We get into chemistry a little bit in this. Don't worry if you don't understand some of it, and certainly if you don't have a chemistry background, some of it's a bit complex. You don't really need to know the detail. It's there for people who are interested, but generally speaking, you don't need to know the detail. It's about giving you an understanding so that if you see something that's deteriorating, you can think a bit about what's happening and you can contact somebody with the right expertise to sort it out. It doesn't mean you've got to become a chemist, obviously. I think basically that's probably about it. You'll hopefully get a good overview of the entire audiovisual media. We look at film. Film always seems to be up the top there, doesn't it? Film and maybe then television and then sound recordings and poor old radio down the bottom. But we try to encompass the lot because they're all important. They're all insights into our world. If you listen to Menzies declaring war in 1939, the recording of his speech, it's moving still. It really is. You can tell he doesn't want to. He's, this is terrible disappointment to him. You listen to, well, you can listen to Chamberlain doing the same thing, and it's even worse, even more moving. You can listen to, I don't know, election results or something. Anyway, let's not get into detail. Basically, the importance of the audiovisual media is significant, and it's across the whole spectrum. It's not just film, so I think we need to bear that in mind as we're going through the topics. Okay, I hope you enjoy the subject, get a lot out of it. Please get active on the forum, and we'll talk more as the semester progresses. All the best. Cheers.